All right, today's date is November 14th, 2023, and I am interviewing Edel Kunkel at Mountainside Montessori in Marshall, Virginia. All right, and how are you doing today?
I am doing good.
Awesome. All right, so we're just going to start with general questions. Like, where did you go to college is one of them.
Okay, so I went to college. I went to the Dublin Institute of Technology in Dublin, Ireland.
Okay.
And I also went to George Mason University.
Awesome. All right, and how long did you stay at both? You stayed did you get your...
So 1 year at Dublin Institute of Technology and 3 years at George Mason.
Okay.
And then my Montessori training was in Santa Monica in California.
Okay, awesome. So you kind of hopped around in terms of where you went.
Around, yes.
Okay.
I also went to Nova for many years. It's the whole convoluted story of my education, but we're just always sort of seeking knowledge. So
right. Okay. So you like to kind of meet new people and have new experiences in different places. Okay. And what's the process of becoming a Montessori teacher? Just in terms of different schooling, do you think it's different for public school teachers versus private school? I know Montessori, you probably have to undergo certain training in order to do that.
So usually to take a Montessori training, you have to have a 4-year bachelor's degree, and then you can take any of the levels of Montessori, like primary, elementary, adolescent.
Right.
I think for regular school, you go to school and you get a teaching degree. Whereas Montessori, you can have a degree in something else and then additionally take the Montessori training as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And so does that mean that you have to take multiple different classes if you want to be an adolescent teacher versus a primary teacher in Montessori?
The adolescent training is actually really new because Maria Montessori hadn't fully flushed out before she died.
Right.
And so she had really flushed out the toddler, she'd really flushed out primary and the elementary, and then she was working on the adolescent. And so her son sort of picked up after, but they still never, everything else is really flushed out from beginning to end. Every lesson, everything is very detailed.
Mm-hmm.
But the pedagogy for the adolescent was never completed by her. And so they've really only started a real training in the last, I want to say 5 to 10 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's fairly, very, very recent then.
Yeah, it's pretty recent. Yeah.
So, and do you know where that's starting? You said her son carried on after she passed away. Or is it just kind of developing everywhere, or is there one main area where it's...
I think it's developing everywhere.
Okay.
Because AMI is its central office is in Amsterdam.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that they sort of come up with a pedagogy, agree on the training, and then they send trainers out to different countries. So I know there's a training center in Sweden right now. I know there's one in Ohio right now for the adolescents at Hershey Montessori. I'm not sure about the others because I haven't really looked recently, but
okay, yeah, that's interesting. I did not know that adolescence was so recent, because you have adolescents here. I didn't realize that. Another question is, what is Montessori learning to you? So how would you describe Montessori learning? What's your take on it?
So Montessori, for me, I guess the really important key features are that it's child-centered. So that would be very important, and that really separates it from other traditional types of schooling because it's very teacher-driven. But here it's sort of child-driven. I think that the belief that a child has everything within itself to be who they're going to be, that our job is to sort of, provide an environment or provide opportunities or connect them to materials so that they can sort of develop their own sense of self. Whereas I think other types of schooling really believe that the child really doesn't really know anything.
Yeah.
And it's the teacher's job to sort of, they're like an empty vessel and the teacher's filling the knowledge.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so they're very, very different. I think Montessori as well. Also, it doesn't think just about academic. It really focuses on sort of preparing children for life. So you learn all these life skills as well,
Mm-hmm.
and we also focus a lot on like social and emotional development. So if you will, it's academic, social, and emotional development, where I think a lot of other schools are just sort of academic focused, maybe.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, I agree. In my research, I'm looking at like Montessori, like her handbook and like all of her journals and like everything.
Yeah.
And she's very much just focused on the child, and I think that's super interesting. Just in terms
Yeah.
of public school, like you said, it's all kind of academics, but yeah.
And also, if you look at, like if we look at our adolescent program, like it finishes in ninth grade, which is really awkward for other traditional settings because it's the very first year of high school.
Yeah.
And so even that is very different because, she believed that, there were different planes of development. And so there were actually 4 planes. And so from 0 to 6 was the first plane, 6 to 12 was the second, and 12 to 15 was the third. And so you had to, you stayed sort of within your planes, and the children acted a certain way and had certain needs in every plane. And so you have to provide the environment for the child and to meet those needs. Do you know what I mean? So that was also very important, and also quite different than the thinking.
And can you like describe what a normal one-on-one Montessori lesson would be? Because I know like when I took Montessori, you would have like every once in a while you would have like a lesson with a teacher, and they would either do probably like racks and tubes or like something like that. But like what really happens, like, I mean, I know, but like just for people who don't.
Yeah, and that's a really good question. So the lessons are really important. They can be mostly individual lessons. Some, as the children get older, you do bigger group lessons. My training is primary, so I work mostly with the sort of younger ones. So our lessons are mostly individual. And at the primary level, lessons are called a 3-period lesson. So there's 3 parts to it, essentially. The first part is where you sort of exchange the information. So, for example, if you were teaching them, what a cube and a sphere and a pyramid was, you're showing them the objects and you're telling them the name. So you're introducing the concept. The second part is where you sort of give them a little test and you ask them, can you show me the cone? Can you show me the sphere?
Mm-hmm.
And then the third part of the lesson is where you give them like really a full-on sort of test. You're saying, what is this? What is this? What is this? And so they're, joining the concept of the object and the name of the object, and, making that connection. And so that's really how you give most of the presentations in the primary environment. Right. And also, in elementary too.
And they, the students just kind of continue the work on their own after that. Do they go back and repeat the lessons every so often?
You hope that they go back and repeat the lessons. The purpose is, yes, that you give them a lesson, and then they own that lesson. They can come back to it anytime they want. And they can also give a lesson maybe to a younger child with your permission. Sometimes it's really nice that an older child can give a lesson to a younger child.
Right.
You see that a lot. I see that's one of your questions later on. You're talking about the different ages and
well, that actually goes into the next question. Is Maria herself talks about the importance of touch, feel, and being in nature. Like, what have you observed in your teaching that is so important about this aspect of Montessori? And like, why is the nature part of Montessori like so important? Like, I know you guys have like nature walks and you go outside all the time, you see the animals. Her aspect of teaching was just so heavily focused on like, here's a square, but let's run your fingers across it and feel it and memorize it by touch. And a lot of the students kind of like built off of each other and were able to teach each other that, because
well, she placed a lot of importance on actually learning through your senses. And so there's a wonderful diagram of the brain and how it relates to the rest of your body and how you process information. And most of it is through your hand. And so it's actually touching something, feeling something, manipulating something, whether it's writing it down, coloring, that sort of sends a lot more information to your brain that you can retain. And so it's very important, and especially for the first plane children. I mean, that's how they learn everything. Like, you look at a toddler or baby, they're constantly like putting things in their mouth because they want to taste it and have all those sensory experiences. So that's really important. That was a multi-layered question, so I'll make sure that I don't like miss.
No, yeah.
There was also kind of nature wrapped in there.
Yeah. No, I did want to. Yeah, I was kind of just like touch and feel, and then also just like nature was just kind of tied on to that, just because being in nature is just so like sensory oriented. You can.
Yeah. And Maria Montessori talks about cosmic education. And so really it's knowing your place in the world. So to know your place in the world, you have to know about the world. And you have to have an education that sort of makes sense in that context. You know what I mean? You're not just learning information to learn information, but you're sort of learning, where you're from, how you relate to the earth, even for the little ones, raking the grass or harvesting the food or watching the cycle of a plant grow, and recycling, composting our food, just seeing how everything relates, to each other, and our role, for children to learn that they do play a role in protecting the earth, eventually loving, having that relationship. So that's also very important.
Yeah. And you talked about them, the children going out and like raking leaves and like doing a little bit of work outside. I know also Montessori children, they do chores, every morning and afternoon. Like, at school, you teach them sweeping, you teach them, and I've heard stories of grown like teenagers, they don't even know how to sweep or do anything, and yeah, I mean, I think that's just like a really important part of Montessori, as well as like you learn just kind of general knowledge as well as academics, like you said. It's just kind of all tied together, and
it's really
that's important.
It's really preparation for life. So where we create a culture in every environment where everybody participates in the culture. I mean, that's how we want to also participate in life and with our friends and our co-workers, and you want to have respect, you want to be able to have the skills to kind of do all the things that you need to do. So when you graduate from college and you go into your apartment for the first time, like, you don't want to have to take your laundry home all the time. You want to have all those skills, to feed yourself. I mean, I know tons of Kyla's friends, for example, like they don't know how to fry an egg or, do the laundry or make their bed, because it's always been done for them. Yeah. And so it is really important. I think it's, there's a lot of reasons, other reasons too. It has an indirect purpose of, calming them, preparing their mind for further work, preparing their hand when they're scrubbing the table left to right. There's like all those things. Maria Montessori talks about normalization, and you can't really teach unless the child is normalized. And so that means that they're sort of calm. And so children really calm when they're given productive work to do, and when they can, feel that they've accomplished something. Like, even very young children feel that. And so they get connected to the environment, they become busy, they start to concentrate, they start to use their brain and their body in a different way. And so she sort of called that normalization. And so to really sort of teach, like, you can't teach a child if they're a little bit hyper or they have no impulse control and they're just, kind of all over the place. So you have to sort of center them, and you center them a lot through all those practical life activities.
Right.
Like sweeping, raking, like they love washing their hands in the soap and
so like giving them focus in order to really like work with them. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's.
Did I miss something? Like I said, I know
no, that's great.
Question, but
no, yeah, one thing about like just like the environment of the Montessori classroom. I know that it's very independent learning. Like the children are supposed to kind of work on their own mainly. But I know that in Montessori classes, the ages are mixed, so it's a very diverse classroom in terms of age. And like how do they help each other? Because there really is like a sense of community in Montessori learning. Yes, it is independent, and yes, you're supposed to kind of work in your own little worlds. But I think that the way that students can help each other, and mostly like in general schooling, you would have kind of your own grade and you would kind of stick to your own age group. Whereas when you're in a Montessori classroom, you could be with, a 7th grader could be put with a 4th grader, and a primary student. They're all kind of mixed together. But
and again, that kind of goes back to following the child, because children all learn at a different pace, and so some children learn something very, very quickly, and some children take a lot more time. And so that's why it doesn't make sense to have all the 7-year-olds together, because you really advanced readers and you have children who are just still sounding out, and so the ones that are sounding out are going to feel bad, and the advanced ones, they're off soaring, and but this child might have lots of strengths, other strengths, and this child might have some weaknesses, so it kind of balances out. So the mixed ages are very important, because that child who learns to read really quickly, they just sort of continue on, and like if they're 4 or 5, they just do sort of the next level, because pretty much in every environment the academic work goes up a couple of grades beyond, so they can like still do research outside of their environment and like continue. There's no limit to their learning. And the multi-age is also very important, because it sort of helps build that community and that culture of helping each other, taking care of each other, that mentorship, being kind to someone who's kind of struggling with something, like using your skills to help them, instead of like feeling, well, they're just not getting it on great, and know, that kind of thing. So you're constantly like supporting that sort of thought and promoting that type of culture and of respect and kindness and helping and mentorship.
Right.
And so
you talked about like a specific curriculum that you kind of, is there like certain like guidelines that you follow as a Montessori teacher? Like I know that each student kind of has to go through each lesson, I'm gonna call it. Is there like, I don't want to call it a checklist or something that's like really like boiling it down, but like in regular schooling, you have like, you have to do pre-algebra, you have to do algebra, you have to do biology. Are there like certain marks that you have to hit in order for a child to move on from primary to lower L to adolescence? And how do you kind of judge that in terms of everyone's in their own area, so how do you kind of...
And so I can speak mostly to primary, because again that's sort of my training. So we'll talk about a primary student that might be moving up to elementary. So you want them, because in primary they learn to read, but in elementary they read to learn. So you want to make sure that they have that skill. But there's benchmarks in terms of like you're looking at, and I can give you a copy of this sheet. There's it's like a sheet that will show like the age and the inner around where they need to be sort of doing certain things. And so, but you have a little bit more time. It's not like at age 5, May the 1st when they graduate, they have to have this and this and this. There's just a little bit more flexibility, but there's more room for that, understanding that we all sort of learn differently, but there is there is benchmarks that you have to reach. but everyone gets there at their pace. So you might be 6.5 when you learn to read, or you might be 5.
Right.
You might even be 7. It depends if there's like something, going on. But did I answer that?
No, yeah. Okay. And how do you prepare those students and work with those students that take longer than others? Do you just kind of like,
if it's not like some form of a learning disability, if it's just sort of in a normal range of a child just struggling a little bit more, and it's not like something like dyslexia or something else where they might have to have an evaluation, that's
right.
like a whole other thing. And so the child is kind of struggling, and it happens, some children, for example, learn their numbers from 1 to 10 really quickly, and they're off to the decimal system, and then they're very quickly then doing addition and subtraction. But some children need a lot more time, and you just practice. You just take that out and practice with them. And I think it's we have the flexibility to do that because the course is not rigid, whereas on Monday the whole class is doing like page 2 and we're all learning our numbers from 1 to 10.
Yeah.
And then tomorrow we're going on, and that child who's still kind of struggling, it's okay, everyone else can move on, but the child who's struggling, we're just going to go back to it, and we're going to build their confidence, and we're just going to repeat and repeat. We're going to talk to the parents if there's something else going on. So it's sort of very individual, and you're supporting in that way. Yeah. And you're partnering with the family. And then if it feels like it's something that there's more to it than just taking a little longer, then it's going to be obvious. And then you're talking to the parents. And so it's very collaborative that way too, and also very respectful of the child's ability, which is really important.
Right. And so the teachers kind of have like a special bond, like they pay more close attention to their students as like
well, when you have them like for 3 years, when you think about it, every age group, so when you spend 3 years with somebody day to day, I know that when, say, for example, Eve came into first grade, she was struggling reading, right? I mean, that's not true, obviously, but but you're struggling reading. I've got 3 years to catch you up. I've got, you just might need a little extra support that first year. So we're reading more, practicing more. Maybe we're sending stuff home with the parents, but we've got, we're going to have a very close and personal relationship because we're together. So I'm going to know about you. I don't have you for just 45 minutes of the day, 3 times a week.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I really know you. And I think that's also really important.
No, definitely.
And a big advantage.
Yeah. Because, it's weird when I am friends with almost all my teachers from here in my new school, but it just works better when you can really like have a real conversation with your teacher. Like when you're having issues, it helps when you can speak up. And I know obviously primary students, they probably don't catch on as easily as like a high school student.
But they do.
I mean, I don't mean in terms. I mean in terms of they wouldn't. I don't know how to word it, but I understand.
I know what you're saying. But like when you think of it in terms of like the respect for the child, and you're really following the child. So I'm only there as a tool. I'm not there as their boss or their. Do you know what I mean? I'm not the overarching sort of. Although sometimes I am. But your role is to connect them to the materials and support their independence and respecting them. So when they have a conversation with you and they tell you something's hard or someone's mean to them or whatever, like you're really taking them seriously. And I think that's what you're referring to, like the confidence that you have and the relationship that you have with adults in your life at school and college now. It stems from the fact that you had very close relationships with the adults in your Montessori education as you know, and you took that to Wakefield, that confidence of just, speaking up for yourself, knowing, having that inner confidence is really important.
Yeah.
And I think we're building that all the time.
Yeah.
I think it's a really important part.
You spoke to like kind of observing the child, and Maria actually, like, this is a direct quote from her. She says, observing as a Montessori teacher and not interfering with their learning. I know you probably know that already. But yeah, I think just observing the child and just seeing like kind of where they go and what they do is just way more important than just sitting down with them and directly speaking to them or trying to lecture them.
And she when she talks about that, she also people, I just did open house this weekend, for example, and it comes up a lot when people ask you, like, what's the ratio of adult to child to student, and they want a smaller ratio. They want like more adults and less students because they think that that's the best thing for the child. Actually, it's really not, because adults actually really get in the way of learning in many cases, especially for the younger ones, because adults want to be really busy, and so they're constantly kind of interfering, where when a child has concentration, you're really supposed to sort of protect that, and it's it's like a sacred thing, really. And that's why Montessori teachers are expected to sort of sit back and observe a lot, so you can really sort of see the interactions, and that you're not busy running around, do this,
right.
that you sit back, and that you really can observe and see what's going on.
And how did you learn this training? Like, did you do internships with people? Did you like observe different classrooms and just kind of get a feel for other Montessori teachers and just kind of like combined all the knowledge that you learned? Or like, was there one teacher that you kind of shadowed for a while? How does a Montessori teacher?
Yes, you have to do a lot of observation. If I remember correctly, like, I had to go to the zoo and I had to observe an animal for like a full day, like every single minute thing that happened. And then you spend weeks observing. Then you also have to observe like a baby. You have to go and observe a baby for like a whole week.
Wow,
taking like lots of notes, and then you're observing in classrooms. I think like Talia's out right now observing for a week. So there is a lot of observation, and it's a very, very important Montessori tool.
Yeah.
Like, she really highlights it. And if she didn't, you probably wouldn't think of it, because you get really busy when you work with children. You can get caught up in all the stuff that's going on and just being busy and doing and cleaning and organizing and chatting.
Yeah.
But if you don't sort of stop and sit back every day and just like look around and just absorb and observe what's going on, then you miss a lot.
Yeah. What made you want to start your own school versus teaching one?
That's a good question.
Why did you choose to kind of take the next step in the Montessori world?
So we were living in Ireland at the time, and Kyla and Marissa were 4 and 2 when we moved back to America.
Mm-hmm.
And when we bought our house, there were 3 Montessori schools in the area. It was Boxwood Montessori in Warrington, Middleburg Montessori, and Mountain Laurel, and all 3 of them had a waiting list at the time. And so the girls had to go to Montessori, because I was already trained and stuff. And so when they couldn't get into school, I was like, well, I have the training, I'll just open my own school. I was just really desperate for them to stay in Montessori. And so instead of buying furniture, because we just bought a house, instead of buying furniture for the house, we bought all the Montessori materials. And so then we just set up a classroom in the living room. So it was kind of like, it was a sort of serendipity. It wasn't that I was like, I'm going to start my own school and I don't want to teach. It was kind of the opposite. I hadn't thought about teaching. So it was just that there was no school for them. So I was like, okay, well, I'll just do it.
Yeah. And did you open up your school to other students as well, or was it like the first year you kind of tried it out with?
No, we bought all the materials, and then we made a sign with the girls, and we basically we had to go through licensing. We had to like go to the county and do all that stuff, and we applied for, and we got a license for like it was really considered like an in-home kind of daycare. That was the license that I got, and we just basically hung a sign out on the road. And we put an ad, I think, in the paper. Like, we weren't really big into Facebook, or I don't even think it was around then.
Yeah.
All that stuff. So it was just an ad in the paper and a sign at the top of the road. And a lady drove in one day, and she saw the sign, and she used to drive to Manassas every day and sit in the parking lot while her daughter went to school, and she'd wait because it wasn't worth her while driving back home.
Yeah.
And so she was delighted. She actually started crying when I showed her the classroom. She was just so happy.
Oh my gosh.
And then the second person was Miss Josephine.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she came for Cardiff.
Oh, okay.
And so she came
now
out to
she's
visit
got
the
like
school.
3 kids that have gone through.
And she's still here 20 years later.
Yeah.
But she scared me because she told me she was a Montessori teacher. And
okay.
so like I'd set up the classroom, and she was coming to observe, like the 3 of us. We I think only 3 students at the time, because maybe 4, because Carter was the 5th.
Yeah.
And she came to observe, and I was petrified because it has to be right. You can walk
right,
into a Montessori environment and go, this is not a Montessori environment. And unfortunately, there is no patent on the word Montessori, so anybody can say they're a Montessori school.
Yeah, I've actually realized that in my research. I was like, wow, anyone
anybody
can call it that.
Yeah, which is terrible, because you see the word Montessori now as just a sort of a cliche word for someone to, pretend they're doing something wonderful.
Yeah.
But they're really not. They're just using it.
And yeah, about your like kind of environment that you've created here. In my research, I've begun to like make connections to your classroom environments and like Maria's handbook, and kind of like just like the basic knowledge of Montessori. Kind of like what she felt important you've like exemplified in your school. In observing other classrooms, are all of them kind of like, they kind of have like a general like idea in terms of like environment and following her kind of like legacy of like what she wanted her education to be. I've only really been around Mountainside and this one particular school, but I was just wondering if other schools either around here, like other schools you've observed, if they're kind of similar, or if they have any drastic differences.
Other Montessori schools?
Yeah, like
particularly?
Yeah, just I don't know, because like I don't know how to say it. Because and I'm not trying to compare it to a public school, but it's part of my thesis is kind of comparing it to other types of schooling. In public schools, you kind of that you've got like 20 classrooms or something. You go from class to class to class, and it's kind of just the same thing. But in Montessori's handbook, she talks about like the importance of like bright colors in the environment, and making sure that the child has the freedom to run around and do things, and just kind of live their life in terms of like very desk oriented teaching. I just didn't know if other schools were different than yours.
Yeah. So you mean like public school or Wakefield or other schools, not necessarily a preschool?
Well, where'd you kind of get your ideas in terms of like how you wanted to design your school? Like what went into, like, what was your thought process when you made like the different classrooms, how you organized them and how you wanted them to look for the children, and how you wanted the different materials to be? Like, was there any?
Yeah, so we just really follow Maria Montessori's pedagogy, because it's laid out very clearly what all those environments should look like. And then, like, if you look at the planes of development, you have to make sure that each environment is set up to meet the needs of the child that's going to be in that environment. And so, for example, in the primary classroom, the size of everything really small, and toddler, same thing. Just one chair at a desk. Whereas then when you move to lower elementary, for example, now you see, aside from the furniture obviously being bigger because the kids are bigger, but you see, tables with like 6 chairs, because now that child is like very social. Like they are driven to like work together. They don't want to work by themselves. Like everything is about collaboration with the peer.
Yeah.
And so that environment is set up, to make sure that happens, because that's the need of that child to be successful, is to collaborate. Which again, like in a traditional schools, you don't really have that opportunity because everyone is sort of like on their own, sitting at their desk, again, listening to the teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it's just always, really following, her pedagogy and, sticking to what the child needs at each level. Like if you look at the adolescent environment, like their environment is really encompasses the farm as well. Like they have to have a lot of outdoor stuff. Their classroom goes like beyond the beyond here, even, because you're going out and doing community service, you're doing projects with other now we have the fair harvest. They have they sell their stuff at the farmers market. There's just like all these other things that they do,
right?
So like all their trips as well, so it's like every environment is really different.
Yeah, and the adolescence is also, I know this is, you're more primary oriented, but the adolescence is just so interesting because they have all those businesses and they're also learning all of those life skills. Is like, it's just another level of just life skills that you just kind of need to know, and it's helpful when it's kind of woven into your academic learning, is because it's general knowledge everyone should know, but not everyone learns it until it's kind of like too late, and they're kind of they kind of need to know it right away, which can be stressful. It's kind of nice how Montessori eases it in.
It has to become kind of part of you. So it's just part of you now, right? It's just
no, definitely
kind of who you are.
I didn't even realize it was happening until I was like, oh, I apparently just have general knowledge that not everyone learns right away.
And that goes for sweeping the floor and doing your laundry and frying an egg and making a cup of tea, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And
during community lunches, I remember we had pasta and pizza days, and like making sure that our financials were in order and everything like that. So, and the farm is important too. You learn farm to table, that life and that skill, and we did 4-H, and it was a little bit traumatizing, but we learned how the world works and everything like that.
We've refined ourselves, from. I don't think were you there when we did like the big chicken project where we.
I was a year before. Nora did. My sister did that.
Nora did that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It was. that was a great thing.
Those days are kind of gone. That was the last, I think, of the hardcore. Yeah.
That was interesting. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, but just in terms of like work days and just going out and being on the farm with the animals and just being really hands on in their environment, and I think that's really special. Is you don't just read about it, you actually go out and you do it and you experience it. And same with the fundraising and the volunteering. You're not just saying, oh, it'd be really nice to go to a food bank and help people. You actually go out and make the time, and it's built into school days, so it's not like you'd be missing something or having to do something extra. But we kind of already answered this already, but this is just a quote that I thought I'd ask you about. So this is from a woman. I think I wrote her name down. I didn't write her name down. I will link it somewhere. So she says that critics of Montessori schools have complained that because the students are given freedom to choose what they study, certain students will not master certain areas of the curriculum in which they are not naturally interested in. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, and you said, you have like a general, baseline, you have baseline knowledge, you kind of have to teach the student. Since it's all, independent, you said like, hopefully the child will want to go back to certain areas and learn certain things. you know, if it needs to be repeated, is it kind of like, I don't know if it's, are certain lessons kind of like, how do I word this? more so like, if it's independent learning, right?
Yeah.
And so if the child does not want to learn a certain thing or like and explore a certain area, let's say they don't like math or something like that, you teach them the lesson, but then they like reject the information and they just want to have absolutely nothing to do with it.
And that happens all day long.
Yeah.
So.
I don't know, how do you kind of like steer them away from that and try to move them into, you know, loving academics? Because my parents, one of the main things was like, I started out in public school and I made it to 3rd grade, and I just really did not enjoy school at all. And my parents, we moved out here, and part of the reason why is because they wanted me to love school and they wanted me to love learning, and the Montessori environment allowed me to do that. I don't know if you...
Do you remember why you didn't like school?
Because I don't like to sit still. I don't like to be, I don't like long lectures. I like to be able to kind of, you know, choose my own way of learning.
You have to be involved in your learning.
Yeah, and I liked the hands-on approach more, and I liked being able to, I'm a very visual learner, so it was very, I learned way easier being able to actually, like, you know, I don't know, like, what's 2 divided by 4, you know, you actually have, like, the beads in front of you, like, for racks and tubes, and you can visually see, but I don't know if that's even a question.
That's true for, like, every child. Like, we all just naturally learn better by doing, you know, by manipulating something. Like, that's so critical that happens. And so children become very joyful learners because you're in charge. And it's different. Like, if you're curious about something, like, you're really going to retain that information, because it's different when you kind of look at something a different way, some information, and you learn it or you gain the knowledge somehow because you were really interested in it. You're more likely to retain that knowledge rather than someone saying to you, here's the knowledge, I want you to memorize that, and I'm going to ask you tomorrow. You might remember tomorrow, you might remember next week, you might even remember next month, but you won't really remember beyond that. Do you know what I mean? Because it's not really part of you. It's not in your subconscious mind. And so, but back to those work avoiders, the ones who are not interested in the math, or the ones that are just want to come and do art all day long. I mean, there's lots and lots of those kids who, you know, I've got a couple of them in my class right now, and so left to their own devices, yes, they'll come in, they'll have snack, they'll paint a little, they'll draw, they'll, you know, go to the library, they will, like, do all these things that are nice and easy, and a lot of the times children are natural perfectionists. And so sometimes they're nervous, or, you know, they might have had a lesson in something, but they're not that great at it. So you have to be really good at, you know, getting them back to that work and building up the skill where they're not confident. And so it's very evident a lot in the primary, because they're only learning to write and they're only learning to read, and there's a lot of things that, you know, are hard. And so, you know, you just have to gently bring them to that. And that's where the limits come in. Like, they have freedom, but yes, you can't come in and just paint all day long. Like, yeah. And so, you know, you again are talking to that person, you're negotiating with them, you're sort of giving them the choices, and they're like bumping up to these limits. You can say, yes, you can paint, but you also have to, like, do your numbers, or you have to do, you know, your addition or subtraction or whatever. Yeah. You have to learn to practice your cursive writing. You've got to read the book, do the phonograms. You have to do all those things. Like, we know what we have to cover before they go in there. And so you're trying to partner with the child to, you know, bring them to where they need to be, but you're partnering with them. Right. You're not, like, really forcing them. In some cases, you might have to use a little bit of leverage and say, yes, you know, you want to practice these letters. So when you're done with that, then you can do something of your choosing, but you have to do that. And that's just the limits. But
Right. Well, of course, you need to actually do a little bit of learning, and of course that's always involved. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my, those are my questions. I don't know if you have anything else to add.
It's just warming up now.
Yeah.
I was a bit nervous in the beginning. I think we covered everything, did we?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know. I was just really fascinated. You know, I was looking at Maria's handbook, and I just started to look at her different, like, they call them discoveries, or like, I don't want to call them like inventions, but just like her different like styles of learning. I was remembering everything, and I was remembering like, you know, the frames with the buttons and like the shoelaces, and like how they learn to even like tie their shoes in the classroom, and they can practice that, and you know, like the geometric shapes and the block tower, and I was just like, all came rushing back. It was so great. I was like, wow. I mean, I never did primary here, but you know, I did help out a few times, and it was so cool to like see the connections and be like, wow, this is like, her vision is like where I went and like experienced, which was really cool.
I'm so excited that you're doing this.
Yeah, I hope I can do it justice.
I think you're going to do great. I think it'll be wonderful. I can't wait to see it.
Well, thank you so much for agreeing to be interviewed and helping me out in the process. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm super proud of you.
Thank you. All right.